Okay, another round of cleaning, and self-time seems to run better. That's much better. I'm quite happy with that. The speeds are actually fairly good on the shutter too, from what I can see, or as much as I can judge at the moment without putting it on the timer. So I'm going to lubricate this pinion here and this with some molybdenum paste. Put them back in the shutter. Put the retaining ring on the front and go and test it on the shutter speed tester. Now there are 2 pins on the retard gear train which control or moderate its interaction with the shutter settings cam plate, and one of them I've already mentioned that I'd straightened that up because it was bent and not in a useful fashion. But there's also one for the high speed, the 500th of a second speed, which effectively disengages the retard gear train completely when the 500th of a second speed is set, and that's this one here. Well, that pin is obviously bent as well. Now whether it's, if you move the entire train inwards or outwards to any degree, you quite possibly will have to adjust the position of that. But of course normally you're not needing to. I'll have to have a look at that, since I know that someone had bent the one pin, probably in an attempt to make a slow shutter work quicker, and it's possible that they bent the other pin for the same reason, and it may not be doing any good. So the 1 second speed, what's that run like? Okay, I'll test this and come back. Well, the speed there was certainly faster than it should be. I tested it at both the 1 second and the 8th position, and they were very much the same in terms of the percentage that thing was running fast. Rather, it was running fast, not slow. So I'm just going to adjust this speed train in for greater engagement, which will slow it down. I'll slacken that screw off slightly. You've got to move this inwards very slightly. Well, it looks like it's all the way in already. Right, I'll test it there, and I may have to make adjustments elsewhere if that is in fact all the way in. I think I made mention that this arm here on the speed train looked like it had been molested. It's certainly a possibility, and it's certainly something I might have to try and return to its natural state. Now, adjustments of that piece are subtle. Basically that piece adjusts the amount of engagement with the pallets. The pallets sort of are like a fork that pulls in around the knurled wheel or the star wheel, and basically that lever limits the amount that they can move to engage, so you can set it so that they engage less and therefore the pellets will move quicker, or you can engage more and so forth, the whole thing would slow down. I think someone's been mucking with that, and I may have to muck with it in turn to see if I can get the thing to go. Anyway, I've got to confirm to see if I've made any change to the speeds here at all. It didn't look to me like that speed train moved at all. I think it was already all the way in. So I've got to confirm that before I make any other changes. Well, the shutter still runs fast, but it's only very, very slightly fast. So I'm going to attempt to bend the pin here outwards slightly, because I'm only looking at possibly, it's probably within tolerance. So I'm going to see if that will make a difference. Basically, I've bent the pin that I'd already straightened up in this direction, I've bent it out in this direction, which will allow the arm to come in further and slow the shutter up. And I'm looking for about less than 10%. I'm happy with the speeds I've got now. That pin for the 500th of a second speed here, I did have to move that slightly. Now I've got to put this piece in. This piece here prevents you from being able to depress the shutter release unless the shutter's actually cocked. That saves you pressing the shutter release when the shutter is not cocked, which of course won't fire anything, and then winding on to the next shot and losing an exposure potentially. Put this retaining ring back in place. Shutter seems to be running well. And I can continue to case it up. So here's the shutter case, the outer case. Now I need to clean this. The track inside here is where the curved pusher, for want of a better name, lives. That pushes the arm on the side of the shutter to cock it. Now on the Retina IIIa cameras, the curved rack that's driven by the action of the camera is one long curved rack, and so it moves inwards and outwards with the film advance. On the Retina 2C types, 3C types, the rack is short and there's just a plain pusher piece that it pushes along, which then pushes on the arm of the shutter. Well, if things are gummy in the case, this piece, not being pulled back by the film advance, has to get pushed back by the lever here. And if things are gummy, then stuff doesn't move as freely as it should do. Let's give this a light wipe with molybdenum paste, and likewise the curved rack. Drop these into place in the case. If I cock the shutter, I should be able to get the outer case to slide over nice and neatly. It did. Now I've got to line up my flash contact here, which I've just done, and we have 3 screws that hold the outer case on. This large head screw here locates the shutter in the lens mount to stop the shutter rotating. And that was just me catching the shutter release with my thumb. These 3 screws in place. This is the smaller of the two, smaller diameter of the two. It's quite a small size. You can strip it out from the case because it's only going into aluminium, and you can strip that if you overdo it. Tighten the screw lightly. I note somebody had gone crazy on that previously. That's the back of the shutter done, and the front rings can go back in place now once I've cleaned them. As this lot has not been cleaned yet. And I need to get all that dust and gunk off them. Let's get these bits in place, I suppose. Right, so first off, I've just cleaned these. I'm just going to give this a very light wipe with molybdenum paste. Just on the underside, that tab points down. Okay, that can go on the shutter. That little tab has to connect into that fork on the aperture setting lever. And the notches here have to line up with the shutter speed settings cam plate. That's good, that's all moving as it should do. Here we have the little ring that telegraphs the numbers to the top of the shutter for your apertures. Little notch on the bottom connects up with a tab at the base there by where the settings lever is. The lens mount at the front, these little notches here, that's your click stops for your shutter speed. I'm just wiping those with a bit of molybdenum paste. Previously they were lubricated with graphite grease, which is a good alternative. And here's the retaining ring. See if I can get this retaining ring started. That seems to be started. Now I'll just tighten this down. I'm just using a wooden toothpick to do this. The click stops should be positive. It shouldn't be overly stiff. Tighten it down until the feel is right. There's a screw hole there, I'll use that. And that tiny black screw, which just tried to get away, goes in there, and that locks the retaining ring so that it doesn't tighten up or loosen up. If you've lost that screw, which is a common problem, just put a drop of lacquer in each of the 3 positions, which will lock that ring from accidentally moving. Okay, so that's all in place. Sounds good. I'll just need to clean the lenses, put them back in there, and we can put this on the camera body. First thing I do with the front and rear groups is clean the body of the lens, not the glass, with naphtha to remove dust, dirt, grease and so forth. can clean the glass using normal domestic glass cleaner. In the first clean, I clean that very lightly, so I want to lift off any particles of dust or grit. I'm rotating this to present a clean part of the cotton bud to the glass. Then, having done it once, I can go in and with a new cotton bud clean that glass more thoroughly. And because I've already lifted off any bits and pieces of dust, I can be a bit firmer with the action. You don't ever want to be grinding dust or grit into a lens surface. Alright, now I'll just clean, polishing that with the dry end of the cotton bud, which of course absorbs the moisture that's on the lens, so it's not entirely dry. Just looking at the state of that, judging by reflected light from my right, it appears to be good. I can screw that on the back of the shutter, do it up tight with my fingers and clean the glass on the rear there, basically following the same procedure again. Normally the outer surfaces of the glass are the ones that are most likely to be dirty, because they're open to the atmosphere and they're open to abuse. Still a lot of dirt coming off there. Do it again. And in an ideal world, you're left with a sparkly clean, smear-free lens, which is good. That's what we want. Alright, front group, same deal. You can clean the outside surfaces first. That can often make it easier to see exactly how well you've achieved cleaning the inside surfaces. It's always easiest to judge how clean a flat lens or a convex lens is compared to trying to judge how well you've got a concave lens clean. Once you've got the front surface cleaned, the convex surface, you can judge more easily just by transmission, by looking through the lens, how well you've done with the other surface. That looks okay to me. I'll pop that on the shutter. You must make sure that you get the red tab lined up with the red mark there. Now I can see a speck of dust in there. Have a look, that's bayoneted into place. I'll clean the outside surface. And this surface is quite clean. That's good. I'm very pleased with that. Right, put that to one side. What have I got here? The retaining ring. I'm just going to clean this with some naphtha, make sure that there's no dirty old oil and rubbish around on it. Oh, there's a bit of black paint there, so this was, can't remember whether this was showed signs of being locked on or not. No, that'll do. Right, I'm ready to put that back on the camera body. Where are the shims? Here are my shims. Then a quick wipe over to remove any oil. These are quite clean, quite free from grease. That is not always the case, which is hardly surprising because they're right up against the focus helical, and that's the source of all evil. Right, camera body. Start by putting the shims on the back of the lens. I normally put the paper shims on first. If one paper shim is thicker than the others, I would put that against the lens body. If you've got two metal shims and one paper shim, put the paper shim in the middle of the sandwich. You want to avoid damage to the paper shims. They're vulnerable. The metal shims are not. Alright, so here's my lens and shutter assembly, and I'll simply fit that into the body. I'm racking the focus up to the close focus position, checking the position of the curved rack here, and I can see that that's well over there to the right, so I'll move that over towards the left, drop that back in place. Check to see if the shutter will cock. And it does. It's cocking freely. So I'm just listening. Yep. I can hear the shutter cocking before it reaches the end of the film advance stroke. So that's just ideal. Put the retaining ring in place. If that shutter hadn't cocked, it would have meant that I would have to move the rack, the curved rack, forward a notch perhaps. Just tighten it up with my fingers. Check again. That seems pretty good to me, so I will tighten that shutter assembly up now completely. Okay, so my main concern now is the timing, the point at which the shutter release button releases the shutter or the film advance, and ideally it should happen at exactly the same point. So I'm just squeezing this very gently, seeing if I can hear one of the clicks. That's the film advance releasing. I can wind on again, I hadn't fired the shutter. So it tells me that the screw on the top of the release shaft is too high and I need to screw it down slightly. Yeah, I can definitely do that. I can repeat that without any problem. So off with the top. Be careful not to, I don't think you can lift out the shutter release easily when it's a 3C, you can when it's a 2C. Alright, so down here where you can't see, I can just see this top of the screw for the release shaft, and I'm just going to slide a screwdriver down in there into the slot. Because I know I'm well out, I've rotated that half a turn. Let's put the top back on, try again. Yeah, that's the film advance releasing before the shutter. So I need to tighten it up a little bit more. If the film advance releases before the shutter, then you may find that when you're composing a shot of some action subject, following the action, and as you squeeze the shutter gently, you may release the film advance, then perhaps change your mind about taking the photo. Perhaps the subject had moved or something before the shutter, had actually fired. Yeah, that definitely released the shutter before it released the film advance. So I've got to press my film release button to release this, and I can wind on. And if I squeeze the shutter release very gently, I can fire the shutter before the film advance is released. So I've got to back that screw out slightly. And I'll try it there. That was about a quarter turn. It's not quite releasing smoothly there, so I'll back it up just slightly. That's good. I can put the screws in the top cover. Okay, so 2 screws at the end here. One screw here. Check the action of the release again. Check that the film release button works smoothly. It does. That's good. Rewind knob can go on. I'll pop that up. Put that spacer on the top. And there was a washer there as well, which we'll put in place. Now the washer's job is to space the rewind knob up slightly so it doesn't scuff the top cover as it's rotating in the parked position. Right, that doesn't leave much. Leatherettes on the base of the camera, back catch, release, and we're just about done. I'll just remove that film advance lever. And bring my leatherettes in. I haven't cleaned that down yet. The leatherettes are in good condition, but they do need a wipe over with a bit of naphtha just to lift off any loose dust and so forth. I'll do that. There's a bit of loose stuff on the back of the leatherette just from the process of getting the leatherettes off, scraping them free, so to speak. And the little circular patch for the film advance lever, same thing, remove anything that's loose. The camera body, I'll deal with that in the same fashion. Just give it a wipe over because of all the handling while I've been rebuilding it. I've doubtless put greasy fingerprints all over the base and the glue won't stick. Now while I'm here, this business where somebody has tried to ruin this by trying to screw a tripod screw in there, I'm just going to blacken that out with a marker pen. Make it less obtrusive. Yeah, that's better. You'd never know now. Well, I'm not telling anyone. Where's the glue? Now, best practice with applying glue to leatherettes is to apply some to a piece of paper and then transfer it on with a toothpick or similar item, and it's much easier to control how much adhesive goes where. If you get it more experienced and you're confident you know what you're doing, you can just squirt some straight onto the leatherette, a large piece like this, and then spread it around. And in an ideal world, you don't want the adhesive getting on the front surface of the leatherette. Some of the leatherettes are very vulnerable. The plastic will soften up. It might be just the particular batch of adhesive you've got today might have a higher content of some particular solvent than normal, and it can easily damage the leatherette. So best just be cautious with your application of adhesive. If it takes a little bit longer to get around it, that's all right. That looks good. I'll put that in place. Now the leatherettes normally shrink a little bit with age, so they often don't want to seat around a raised boss like this as well as they might. So take the time to make sure it's pressed down firmly. That looks good. and put the film advance lever back on. And apply some adhesive to the patch. These leatherettes don't appear to have ever been off the camera before, so they are in very good condition and haven't got a thick and crusty layer of old adhesive on the back of them. But frequently you have to scrape the leatherettes down to remove old adhesive. From previous repair efforts, in some cases the leatherettes can be a bit of a disaster with multiple layers of different adhesives, some very thickly applied. Not today. Okay, getting this catch together is always a little bit awkward. Once you've done it 1,000 times, it's better. So I put one screw up from underneath in the long slot. Take this spring, push that into position. Now the spring tension's holding all that together. Carefully lower this into place. Get that screw started. Check that this moves and returns freely. That appears to be pretty good. If there's any danger that that spring is shifted and it's not sitting where it should be, if it's become trapped, then just stop and do it again. You don't want to damage the spring, because if you distort the spring, your chances of getting it seated correctly are reduced. Alright, that is the Retina IIIc. And it's ready to go home to its owner. Thanks for watching.